The Panthera snow bike project. This project has been a couple years in the making, and it has been 5 months since my last video. It is finally time to begin. I bought a 2020 KTM 350 SXF in late 23, tore it to the frame, shipped the frame to Canada for 3D modeling to find out that frame would not work. I reassembled that bike, and then I bought Monty's 2021 Honda CRF 450R and tore it to the frame, as Panthera confirmed this Honda chassis would get the job done. So let's rip this Honda 450 down to the frame and then stuff a 600cc two-stroke engine inside of it.
Shifter. It's always the damn shifter.
The day has finally come to build a 600cc two-stroke fuel-injected electric start snow bike using the brand new Panthera PM09 engine, along with a mountaintop snow bike kit with a 126-inch track and 3¼ inch lugs, a 2021 Honda CRF 450 chassis, along with a wide variety of snow bike parts from C3 Powersports. I know it's March, so I better get to work. I have never built a snow bike before, and I could not be more excited. Let's get into it. All right, guys, it's the moment of truth. Time to pop the lid and reveal this PM09. Oh my gosh. Impressive packing job. Let me pull this all out and I'll show you what we got. All right, we should be ready for blast off here. Wait till you get a look at this thing. Come on. All right, not quite ready for blast off. Aha. Take two. Oh yeah, baby. Oh. The Panthera PM09 engine is officially on my workbench. I can't even believe the logistics of shipping this thing. Look at that completely custom frame cradle they had to make. Not to mention the development of a completely new 600cc fuel-injected two-stroke motor. This has literally never been done. This pipe is an absolute work of art, totally massive, the biggest expansion chamber I've ever seen. coupled with a gorgeous new silencer. Yes, I've been waiting for this day for a long time, but I mean, look at what went into developing this thing. What an absolute behemoth of an engine. I've got all of my electronics right here, including that ECU, user manual for the engine itself, along with a manual to fit this into that CRF 450 chassis, along with the CRF fit kit. So the first thing I did was read both manuals to make sure I had any important information and would give myself the best chance at success during installation. I installed some new IMS Rally foot pegs, as these large, wide pegs are good for snow bike applications. I had barely even gotten started and was already dreaming about ripping this thing through the snow. Now I went to remove the pipe, and after removing all 4 springs, I could not get it to budge, even after giving it a whack with a mallet. I then removed the entire exhaust manifold and didn't really want to force it in case I was missing something. I emailed Panthera, who said it should just pop right off and it's simply an O-ring seal, so I'm guessing it got a little compressed in shipping. We will revisit that one later. I removed the entire wiring harness and the shift lever to install the engine into the frame. I quickly found that it would be easiest to remove the throttle body as well. For some reason, I then decided to switch to trying to install from the right side of the frame, where I unfortunately got a little hung up on the clutch cover and hate to admit that I scratched it. I taped it to avoid scratching it more on my next attempt, but found installation from the left is definitely the way to go and was pretty painless. So if you put a Panthera engine in a Honda chassis, install it from the left. Nothing my boots aren't going to do pretty quickly anyway, but I'm still a little ashamed. I reinstalled the throttle body and fuel injector and noticed it would be a close fit with one of the frame tabs, but I still needed to actually mount the engine to see precisely where it would be located. I thought that maybe installing the swing arm axle first would help me align the engine, but you'll see that was not exactly the case. The left engine bracket aligned pretty easily and I was able to get those bolts started. But the right has a sizable flanged end, and with the swing arm axle installed, the engine did not have enough play for me to make this happen. I got one of the provided aluminum spacers and a couple motor mount bolts started from the left to see if this would help me. Ultimately, I was still struggling to align that right motor bracket, so I removed the swing arm axle to allow some more movement in the engine. That was indeed the ticket, and the right bracket went in smoothly. With both brackets installed, I was able to finesse each bolt into place, and as I was trying to install the swing arm axle for alignment, I realized the fuel line was making contact with the frame and hanging me up. I once again removed the throttle body to make this process easier and remove that from the equation. Retrofitting a new engine into a completely different chassis is obviously a tall task, and Panthera has done a good job with these brackets. There's just a lot more to align than putting an OEM engine inside an OEM frame, and things do need to be perfect. This would definitely be an easier job with 2 people, as one person could wrestle the engine into place as another places bolts. I installed the upper engine hangers and then was able to appropriately install each bolt. Now before torquing, I figured I might as well actually get this mountaintop track on to see how it aligns and ensure the motor is exactly where it needs to be. I loosened the arms on the mountaintop kit so they could play a little side to side to make this process smoother. I had a tricky time sliding the provided Panthera bushing into place, so I electrical taped it to the mountaintop bushing, which made it super easy. Now the right bushing seemed about 1 mil too wide, and while it may have fit had I tried hard enough and shifted things around, I ended up just grinding a millimeter off of it with the rotary tool. I smoothed it out with a prime wheel, and for the torque of this axle along with the flex of the frame, I am not overly concerned about making this change, and I was then able to get the axle through. I must admit, it's funny going from being so familiar with what I'm working on to having no clue what I'm doing. And I have to remind myself, there was a point in time where I had no idea how to build a bike like this either. One step at a time, slowly learning. From there, I could torque each of the engine bolts. According to the Panthera manual, the 8mm bolts are 16 foot-pounds and the 10mm bolts are 25.5 foot-pounds, which seemed a little low to me compared to other motor mount specs, but I followed the spec sheet. My only concern was the 2 lower bolts seemed slightly short, as they only catch about half of the threads on those nuts, so I will ask Panthera what they think there just to be safe. With each of those bolts torqued, the engine is officially mounted in the frame. I went back to install the throttle body and found it was very tricky to slide into the intake manifold past this frame tab as I suspected earlier. While it might have been possible with some more effort, I could modify this tab without any structural impact. I simply removed a little bit of material from it, which enabled me to slip the throttle body past. The injector was then reinstalled as well, and I moved on to the radiators. The radiators come with some aluminum spacers that bow them out to clear the engine. That step was easy enough, and then just as I began trying to figure out how on earth I would begin routing radiator hoses, I got a text that Mikey from Deja Moto had a window in his busy schedule and was available to build the snow bike forks. I headed over to Deja, which ended up being super valuable, not just for the fork rebuild, as he had just done a set of forks for a Panthera 600 and a Honda chassis. He gave me the contact, who I called, and was incredibly helpful with providing photos and tips for getting this bike built. But we will revisit that soon. Deja Moto is known for his incredible suspension knowledge and attention to detail, but also began developing his own line of tools over the past couple of years. He is filling gaps in the suspension tooling market and doing it better than anyone else. If you know Mikey, you know he doesn't half-ass anything. If you don't, just watch this suspension build process and you will see he is a true master of his craft, someone you can trust, and a business worth supporting if you are a suspension tech in need of specialty tools, and he does also offer some tools useful to the home mechanic like me.
Normally these Showa caps are so tight, they're kind of a pain in the ass to get cracked loose, especially from the factory. And so you either have to completely crunch the shit out of it in the vice jaws. However, when you're trying to get a really stuck cap loose, you usually don't have enough grip and it wants to slip. From the factory, they're so tight, it just keeps spinning. That's why I machined this guy yesterday. You got way more surface grip or surface area and distributes that vice pressure over more area. Okay, get a spec sheet built while those are draining.
A typing class might save you some time each week.
Dude.
I'm just kidding.
So one thing you got to be super careful about with these Showa forks is the rebound adjuster nut is really shallow and thin-walled. You always have to have a socket where you've ground off, or you can buy them that way, but like a normal socket, you can see has like a rounded edge on it. So you're not getting as much purchase on this really shallow, thin-walled nut. Whereas here it's machined flat, so that edge is nice and sharp, so you get maximum purchase on that thin-walled nut. Showas are also Loctited and 50 foot-pounds, so you gotta heat them up. Just get really good bite when you go to pop them loose. Oh, I got these from a buddy over at Island Cycles. Pretty slick little tool that keeps the clicker off the ground so you can get the rebound adjuster out easier.
Shout out Highland Cycles.
Yeah, to be fair, I did send him a whole grip of tools too, so tradesies. Yeah, I think you could use new bushings. So a lot of people actually kind of improperly diagnose bushings. They're always looking at the Teflon, which is important. There shouldn't be any blemishes on the Teflon. But the other thing they should look at is on the inside of, for example, the slide bushing, the contact point on the inner tube is actually slightly convex. And that allows this bushing to kind of rock and pivot in place so it can follow the bending contour of the outer tube. As everything's flexing and bending, this bushing can kind of rock and pivot and follow the profile. So even though the Teflon looks okay, it is important to also change the bushing if you're getting wear like that. Normal service shops just make it not leak, whereas performance entities are looking at stuff like this, realizing all these little things add up and will contribute to performance. So that's kind of why suspension shops are typically more expensive. Tusk, brand of the pros. You're a Tusk guy, right?
Available from Rocky Mountain.
Dude, hundreds and hundreds of forks I've taken apart with this. Sometimes it helps to heat up the tube. They come apart easier. So we'll resurface these. You can kind of see the vertical burnishing marks. Tubes are actually supposed to be a certain roughness so that they leave an oil film, oil retention, and that's what lubricates the seals. That surface finish will get wore down just from the debris, dirt and stuff stuck in the dust wiper and seals. So all that debris will wear down that surface finish, and we're talking like kind of microscopic level, and then it can't retain an oil film. So it can actually burn the tube. It'll turn it like tan and maybe even blue because the seal's getting so hot. Resurface it, you restore kind of the peaks and valleys, and you can only do that so many times because you're losing overall dimension slightly. It's just one of those things you learn over a decade of doing suspension and thousands of forks, kind of like what the right sweet spot is. Now you can see it's kind of more of a consistent surface finish. This is basically the culmination of like 10 years of testing, and this is kind of what we've landed on as being a decent average. At the very bottom of the fork, there's a cup. Down in the bottom here, that's a really difficult area to clean. It's easier just to throw it in the ultrasonic.
What is the solution in there?
I can't tell you that. We make these handy dandy cylinder clamps right there on that CNC machine. You can buy cylinder clamps. It's not that we invented anything, but most of the clamps you can buy are kind of wimpy. They're like super small, so you're not getting a lot of purchase, and these tubes are really, really thin walled. So if you're trying to get a good grip on that tube to loosen like the cartridge cylinder head or even a really stuck inner cap, you gotta just crank down on these things to get enough grip. And I didn't like that, so we built these that are like literally twice as tall. You get way more surface area, and you don't have to like totally crush these tubes to be able to get a good grip on them.
Why is it that snow bikes need so much stiffer suspension than a dirt application?
More or less just because of the resistance in the front end. You're just pushing a lot more. You know, the resistance of a wheel rolling over dirt is very little. We're going to machine the peening off of this. So all the Japanese, and actually WP now, but all the Japanese manufacturers, the threads where the piston assembly is, that thread is peened over, like mushed over, so this nut can't come off. So you got to either grind or machine that away. And same with the rebound rod.
Those need to come off to replace wearables, or is that for valving?
That's for valving. The thing you got to be really careful of, a lot of guys will grind these away. The problem with grinding is it creates a hot spark. So that hot spark has the possibility of sticking to something or like melting into it easier. When you use like either a lathe, or I have a little cutter you'll see that creates like just a chip. A chip is less likely to stick into one of the, or like melt its way into one of the wear surfaces. That's why I prefer this method, so I don't destroy anything. But it is expensive, you gotta buy a lathe. So this is the one I was telling you about where it creates like a cold chip rather than a hot ember. So if you're grinding, there's potential that grinding dust gets stuck in that piston band. And I prefer to do it away from the suspension work center, so I don't get cross-contamination. That kind of little teat off of there and just flatten it out, and then I'll kind of chamfer it and then hit it with the wire wheel. Countersink, knock that burr off. Pretty much any kind of loose flap of metal or whatever is going to cause problems.
Now, while Mikey updates these shim stacks for the forks, I want to add a quick note, as you guys have seen me work with Daniel Schmidt at DSC Motorsports, who valved my KTM last year as well as my Yamaha super recently, and I would recommend each of these guys. Mikey's schedule is generally jam-packed, and he usually only takes WP, while Daniel lives 3 hours away from me, so there has come a time and place for me to work with each of them, and thankfully, they're both cool with it and phenomenal suspension techs.
Since we put such a stiff setting in these, and then in stock trim, they have kind of like bleed, so they go together easily, but I've taken out that bleed. There's what's called a bleed shim. So the very first shim doesn't cover the whole thing, so a certain amount of fluid can just freely flow in either direction. I removed that, so now it's fully sealed. So now basically no fluid can freely move through that bleed circuit, which is the clicker circuit. So it's a huge pain in the ass, but it makes it good for snow biking. Just got to put a ton of pressure on it to get it to slowly bleed through. So these guys, and on the topic of keeping the bike from getting too far in the stroke, these are spring perches. The idea is, as the fork's traveling through the stroke, this whole bottom area inside the fork where the spring is, there's a fluid bath in there, and it gets more dense the deeper in the fork you get. It's getting splashed around, but this is considered a secondary damping situation. So the spring perch sits like that, and then the spring is all right here. Well, the fluid has to flow through this perch as the fork's compressing. So if you go to a perch that's got way more restriction on it, that really slows down the speed of the fork, you know, kind of deeper in the travel. So it's really keeping you out of that last third of the stroke, which is what you want on a snow bike. The cool thing about these too is you can actually drill these out, so you can kind of like customize the amount of flow you want. So you can open these holes up some more for more flow, but I've actually found that this is kind of like the minimum amount that you should have. That's why they provide them like this, and that actually ends up being right for snow bikes.
With the revalve complete, I watched and learned as much as I could while Mikey reassembled these forks. I noticed a couple more things that really impressed me as they came back together. First, when Mikey pulled the new SKF fork seals from their packaging, he hit them with compressed air to remove any small paper or cardboard debris from them. It is such a simple task that makes so much sense when you see it happen, but I realized that's not something I've done for every fork rebuild, and I've left the possibility of contaminants inside the forks. The attention required to ensure there is no debris in the forks and they perform as good as they can is, like Mikey said earlier, something that separates a high-end suspension shop like this from a home mechanic. And there are valuable skills and techniques to be learned from watching Mikey, which brings me to the next item that impressed me. These are brand new fork springs.
Because they're kind of like custom made, some of the fine details of the production kind of, basically a lot of times that little clipped coil sticks out a little bit on both sides, and it's got a sharp edge, and that can wreak havoc on the inside of the inner tube. So I always just kind of lightly touch up that sharp edge with the sander and the wire wheel.
Now, having the awareness to clean up the edge of a brand new spring is a level of detail and attention you are not going to find many places. It honestly motivates me to continue perfecting my craft, finding more places to do things even better on these bike builds. With those new, very stiff springs intended for snow biking, Mikey reassembled the forks, and here is a comparison to show the stiffness between an off-road fork and a snow bike fork.
So this is set up for hard enduro, but for heavier guys, so it's got stiffer than usual springs. Snow bike. It pretty much just like stops halfway through the stroke. Sick, dude. Well, glad we were able to get that one done for you.
And that is where we're at on this thing. This engine arrived early March, Mikey built the suspension late March, and now it's almost the end of April. I've spent the last month wrapping up the RM125 project, learning to weld, working on the CR500, and riding dirt bikes. With the engine arriving in March, I knew it was an ambitious task to try and get this thing finished and on snow before all of the snow is gone. That said, I am going to keep plucking away at this build as time allows, although my priorities right now have sort of shifted to dirt biking mode, which means it is looking more likely that this bike will see snow for the first time in late 2025 or winter of 2026. Definitely some important lessons learned here. I was allowing myself to stress out about the timelines of the RM, the CR500, and this, and I had to remind myself, you can only do as much as you can do. There's no point in stressing, there's no point in worrying, every goal timeline won't be met, and every project won't go exactly as planned. That is all part of it. But the puzzle pieces are all here, and I am thrilled at this opportunity to be building this snow bike. Also, I've got a new shirt and hat available on the website. These get you entered to win the CR500. Super sick design, if you ask me. Shout out to Monty for cooking this one up. I have not forgotten about the CR500. I will see you guys soon with another episode of that series as well. And I promise I will be back with further progress on this Panthera snow bike build.